the Socretic priority of making the definitions. What we must interact with each other. That is the philosophical elements of the great personality of Socrates. He starts his discussion by prioritizing the search for definitions. In most cases, Socratic initiates his discourse with an expert on a subject by seeking a definition by asking or giving examples like that: what is virtue, what is goodness, what is justice or courage. To establish such definitions, Socrates first gathers clear examples of virtue and then seeks to establish what they had in common. According to Guthrie, Socrates lived in an era when sophists had challenged the meaning of various virtues, questioning their substance. Socrates' quest for definition was an attempt to clear the atmosphere from their radical skepticism. Some scholars have argued that Socrates does not endorse the priority of definition as a principle, because they have identified cases where he does not do so. Some have argued that this priority of definition comes from Plato rather than Socrates. Philosopher Peter Gitch, accepting that Socrates endorses the priority of definition, finds the technique fallacious. According to Gitch, one may know a proportion even if one cannot define the terms in which the proposition is stated. This great personality have his own irony. There is a widespread assumption that Socrates was an ironist, mostly based on the depiction of Socrates by Plato and Aristotle. Socrates' irony is so subtle and slightly humorous that it often leaves the reader wondering if Socrates is making an intentional pun. Plato's Euthyphro is filled with Socratic irony. The story begins when Socrates is meeting with Euthyphro, a man who has accused his own father of murder. When Socrates first hears the details of the story, he comments, "It is not, I think, any random person who could do this. Persecute one's father? Correctly, but surely one who is already far progressed in wisdom." When Euthyphro boasts about his understanding of divinity, Socrates responds that it is most important that I become your student. Socrates is commonly seen as ironic when using praise to flatter or when addressing his interlocutors. Socrates' intellectualism and eudaimonism. It helps us to know the pursuit of eudaimonia motivates all human action directly or indirectly. Virtue and knowledge are linked in Socrates' view to eudaimonia, but how closely he considered them to be connected is still debated. Some argue that Socrates thought that virtue and eudaimonia are identical. According to another view, virtue serves as a means to eudaimonia, the identical and sufficiency. According to the another view, virtue serves as means to eudaimonia. Another point of debate is whether, according to Socrates, people desire what is in fact, or rather simply what they perceive as good. He has related with the moral intellectualism. It refers the prominent role Socrates gave to knowledge. He believed that all virtue was based on knowledge. Hence, Socrates is characterized a virtue intellectualist. He also believed that humans were guided by the cognitive power to comprehend what they desire. The Socratic intellectualism and Socratic eudaimonism. For Socrates, the pursuit of eudaimonia motivates all human action, directly or indirectly. Virtue and knowledge are linked. In Socrates' view to eudaimonia, but how closely he considered them to be connected is still debated. Some argue that Socrates thought that virtue and eudaimonia are identical. According to another view, virtue serves as a means to eudaimonia. The identical and sufficiency, these respectively. Another point of debate is whether, according to Socrates, people desire what is, in fact, good, or rather simply what they perceive as good. There is moral intellectualism, refers to the prominent role Socrates gave to knowledge. He believed that all virtue was based on knowledge. Hence, Socrates is characterized as a virtue intellectualist. He also believed that humans were guided by the cognitive power to comprehend what they desire while diminishing the role of impulses. A view termed motivational intellectualism in Plato's Protagoras. Socrates implies that no one is willingly, which has become the hallmark of Socratic virtue intellectualism. In Socratic moral philosophy, priority is given to the intellect as being the way to life a good life. Socratic de-emphasizes irrational beliefs of passions. Plato's dialogues that support Socrates' intellectual motivism as the thesis do not benefit him. And Meno, where Socrates explains to Meno his view that no one wants bad things unless they do not know what is good and bad in the first place. Scholars have been puzzled by Socrates' view that akrasia, acting because of one's irrational passions, contrary to one's knowledge or beliefs. It is impossible. Most believe that Socrates left no space for irrational desires, although some claim that Socrates acknowledged the existence of irrational motivations, but they play a primary role in decision making. The decision making is perfect goal, perfect living path for each and every human being. In several texts, Socrates claims he hears a demonic sign, an inner voice heard usually when he was about to make a mistake. Socrates gave a brief description of this daemonian at his trial. The reason for this is something you have heard me frequently mention in different places, namely the fact that I experience something divine and demonic, as Meletus has inscribed in his indictment by way of mockery. It started in my childhood, the occurrence of a particular voice. Whenever it occurs, it always deters me from the course of action I was intending to engage in. But it never gives me positive advice. It is this that has opposed my practicing politics. And I think its doing so has been absolutely fine. Modern scholarship has variously interpreted this Socratic daemonion as a rational source of knowledge, an impulse, a dream, or even paramonial experience felt by an ascetic Socrates. Let us know more about Socratic virtue and what is the Socratic knowledge. Virtue and knowledge is more important thing to the person Socrates. His theory of virtue states that all virtues are essential. One, since they are form of knowledge, the reason a person is not good is because they lack knowledge. His knowledge is united, virtues are united. Another famous dictum, no one is also derives from his. In Protagoras, Socrates argues for the unity of virtues using the example of courage. If someone knows what the relevant danger is, they can undertake the risk. Aristotle somewhere writes, Socrates the elder thought that the end of life was knowledge of virtue, and he used it to. And he used it to seek for the definition of justice, courage, and each of the parts of it. And this was a reasonable approach since he thought that all virtues were sciences, and that as soon as one knew justice, he would be just. While Socrates was involved in public, political, and cultural debate, it is hard to define his exact political philosophy. In Plato's Gorgias, he tells Callias, I believe that I am one of few Athenians, so as not to say I am the only one, but the only one among our contemporaries. To take up the true political craft and practice the true politics. This is because the speeches I make on each occasion do not aim at gratification but at what's best. His claim illustrates his aversion for the established democratic assemblies and procedures such as voting, since Socrates saw politicians and rhetoricians as using tries to mislead the public. He never ran for office or suggested any legislation. Rather, he aimed to help the city flourish by improving its citizens. As a citizen, he abided by the law, he obeyed the rules, and carried out his military duty by fighting where wars abroad. His dialogues, however, make little mention of contemporary political decisions such as the Sicilian expeditions. Socrates spent his time conversing with citizens, among them powerful members of Athenian society, scrutinizing their beliefs and bringing the contradictions of their ideas to light. Socrates believed he was doing them a favor since. For him, politics was about shaping the moral landscape of the city through philosophy rather than electoral procedures. There is a debate over where Socrates stood in the polarized Athenian political climate, which was divided between oligarchs and democrats. While there is no clear textual evidence, one widely held theory holds that Socrates leaned towards democracy. He disobeyed the one order that the oligarchic government of the 30 tyrants gave him. He respected the laws and political system of Athens. And according to this argument, his affinity for the ideas of democratic Athenians was a reason why he had not wanted to escape prison and the death penalty. On the other hand, there is some evidence that Socrates leaned towards oligarchy. Most of his friends supported oligarchy. He was contemptuous of the opinion of the many and was critical of the democratic process. And Protagoras shows some anti-democratic elements, less mainstream arguments suggest that Socrates favored democratic republicanism, a theory that prioritizes active participation in public life and concern for the city. Yet another suggestion is that Socrates endorsed views in line with liberalism, a political ideology formed in the age of enlightenment. This argument is mostly based on Crito and Apology, where Socrates talks about the mutually beneficial relationship between the city and its citizens. According to Socrates, citizens are morally autonomous and free to leave the city if they wish, but by staying within the city, they also accept to match Islamic faith. According to Muslim scholars, Socrates made arguments. He asked questions for monotheism and for the temporality of this world and rewards in the next life. His influence in the Arabic speaking would continue to the present day. In medieval times, little of Socrates' thoughts survived in the Christian world as a whole. However, works on Socrates from Christian scholars such as Latinius, Eusebius, and Augustine were maintained in the Byzantine Empire, where Socrates was studied under a Christian lens. After the fall of Constantinople, many of the texts were brought back into the world of Roman Christianity, where they were translated into Latin. Overall, ancient Socratic philosophy, like the rest of classical literature before the Renaissance, was addressed with skepticism in the Christian world at first. During the early Italian Renaissance, two different narratives of Socrates developed. On the other hand, the humanist movement revived interest in classical authors. Leonardo Bruni translated many of Plato's Socratic dialogues, while his pupil Giannozzo Manetti authored a well-circulated book, The Life of Socrates. They both presented a civic version of Socrates, according to which Socrates was a humanist and a supporter of republicanism. during the 4th century BC and after. For Nietzsche, Socrates turned the scope of philosophy from pre-Socratic naturalism to rationalism and intellectualism. He writes, I conceive of as precursors to reformation of the Greeks, but not Socrates. With Empedocles and Democles, the Greeks were well on their way to days, taking the correct measure of human existence. Its unreason the intellectualism